Howdy there, folks. Welcome into today's video. Wow, this is a big one. You gotta be flipping my flapjacks. This is a huge video here from a gentleman named George Gammon. He is predicting that Amazon could cut about half of their workforce in 2023. And there's two reasons I want to react to this video. And this is the only one we're going to focus on. Usually we react to like 2 or 3 videos per reaction. This is the only one I want to react to here today. And the reason being is this Amazon situation, cutting like half their workforce, that would be an insane number. I want to talk about how realistic that is and like what would it take for them to cut 800,000 employees, which would be just like an unparalleled number out there, okay? But the other reason I wanted to show you guys this is I think he basically illustrates a great look at kind of what's happened in the economy over the last few years and kind of what's going to happen in 2023. And so I thought, you know, between him explaining this point very well and then that controversial take of Amazon cutting half their workforce, I thought this was definitely worth a reaction here today. So hope you guys enjoyed. As always, thank you everybody that subscribed to this channel. I think we're over 19,400 plus subscribers at this point in time. So thank you every single person that subscribed to the channel. I'm glad you guys are enjoying the channel. I appreciate everybody that subscribed to the channel as always. Much love. Also, we got the massive epic once a year sale coming on for the private stock group. So if you want access to that deal as soon as it drops on Black Friday, go ahead and check out pinned comment down there. And then we'll send over the deal as soon as it drops on Black Friday. That gives you access to the private Discord chat as well as all my different course curriculums and things like that. Okay. Alrighty guys, let's jump into this. And I would love to hear your opinion in the comment section as well.
2019. We've got 5 of the average Joes right here, and we'll say they represent the entire workforce in the United States. Now back then, let's just say that their average checking account balance or savings account and checking account balance was about $500. Okay, and let's just say their monthly income was about $1,000, their monthly expenses about $950. So they've got about $50 at the end of every single month to put into that checking or savings account. But sometimes they have an emergency, so it always hovers around $500 as far as their overall balance. Okay, then we have 2020, and the government's response to the cerveza sickness creates massive unemployment. But then they come in and say, well, we'll give you the stimmy checks. You don't have to pay your rent. You don't have to pay your mortgage or your student loan. So this dramatically affects their purchasing power. So their checking account or their account balance goes from $500 up to $2,000. Their income, although there are people unemployed, so let me start up here. So we had 5 people employed here. Now we only have 3 because of the massive unemployment the government created. So these red guys here with the frowns on their faces, the red average Joes, they represent people who are now unemployed. Okay, now we go down. The average account balance, $2,000. The average income, even though these people are unemployed, has gone up to $2,000 because the government, your drunk, insolvent Uncle Sam, is just making it rain free money. But unfortunately, we know that they screwed up all the supply chains by their central planning and authoritarian meddling in the real economy globally. So we had inflation skyrocket. So now the average Joe's expenses go from $950 up to $1,500.
So I just think something he's a little inaccurate here in my opinion is 2020 we didn't really see a huge increase in inflation. It really started in 2021 is when we started to see that huge ramp up in inflation, and then obviously 2022 took us to the moon in terms of inflation. Now something that needs to be said that I think is very important to everybody watching this video right now is you have to understand, if the government, let's say they didn't help things out, we would likely have had a Great Depression type scenario, right? Because they forced tons of people to lose their jobs because of obviously the shutdowns and everything like that. So unemployment was on its way to 20+%. So in a scenario, imagine they never helped anything out. They never did the stimulus checks. They never, did all the different programs they did where you didn't have to pay your rent and things like that. We would have still had a massively messy economy. It would have been a different mess than we have right now, where we have a mess of inflation, and now we're trying to get rid of that inflation, and they're raising rates, and obviously that's, collapsed crypto markets, that's collapsed a ton of stocks. Businesses are obviously starting to really fire a lot of folks, and so that's created a whole other dilemma. But if they had just shut things down and never helped the situation, let's be quite clear, we'd probably still be looking at like 20% plus unemployment. Now, you could also flip that and you could say, well, maybe they should have never shut down something. I don't want to get into that debate. That's a whole other debate. That's a rabbit hole, and my gosh, okay, that's a whole mess there. But nonetheless, the fact that they forced everything to be shut down, we would still likely have unemployment of at least 15% plus, if not 20% plus today. Because like if everybody was out of work and then simultaneously everybody still had to pay mortgage and rents and they got no help, oh boy, that would have been ugly times ugly.
Well, this hasn't really impacted them negatively yet because they're still making more than they're spending, far more than they're spending compared to where they were in 2019, and they have way more in the bank. So what do? They go out there and spend a ton of money at places like Target and Amazon and restaurants, etc. So then what happens is all these restaurants, and Jeff Bezos looks at this, he says, wow, business is booming. My goodness, the economy is on fire. So what do? They go back and hire all the people that lost their jobs as a result of the government's response to the cerveza sickness, i.e. lockdowns. Okay, so now they're in a pretty good...
And not only that, also these people ended up getting their jobs back anyways, or those jobs became available, right? Because let's say you worked at, the stadium, or let's say you worked at a concert venue or whatever, right? And so that was shut down for that period of time. At the end of the day, concerts ended up starting to open back up at the end of 2021 and obviously this year in 2022. And, obviously all sporting events came back and all those random jobs, let's call it service jobs, hotels, all that stuff. It obviously opened back up toward the end of 2021 and then into 2022. So all those jobs came back simultaneously with obviously this mass hiring from tech companies and everybody that was feeling the, let's call it stimulus effects out there that they were loving.
They've got $2,000 in the bank. Their pay has gone from $1,000 up to $1,250 because now we have a labor shortage in places like the local restaurant, the local dry cleaner, the local fast food joint, or Amazon are willing to pay their employees more money. But there's a catch. Now the average Joe's expenses have gone from $950 to $1,500, all the way up to $750. So in 2019, at the end of the month, they had an extra $50. But now in 2021, they've got a deficit of $500 because their wage...
And this I just don't agree with here, once again, on a factual basis, data basis, anything you want to look at, or opinion basis on all different fronts. In 2021, no, the consumer is still good. It's in 2022 is when we have this deficit issue that has crept in.
Have gone up, but the rate of inflation has gone up a lot more. But the consumer is still doing okay. They can still afford to buy the stuff.
If you look at like savings rates or anything like that, and by the way, I got something to tell you guys about savings rates if you didn't know. We're down to levels now at this point in time that we haven't been back to since like right prior to the great financial crisis, which is quite scary. But in 2021, actually, for most of 2021, the savings account, the savings rate was actually pretty dang high in the United States of America. It was among the highest we'd been in many, many years, if not, a decade or two. It was incredible. It's really in 2022 when all savings just started to get wiped out in a massive, massive way. It's really happened over this year, and you can track that by looking at the all the different data out there around savings rates. It's fallen off a cliff, and now we're down to like 3%. No bueno.
Need because of this cushion they have in their bank account. But now we fast forward to 2022, and all the chickens are coming home to roost. Everyone is realizing there is no free lunch, and all of the government intervention back in 2020 has just made things much, much worse. So although the unemployment rate is still very, very low, all these people are still employed by Amazon and Target, let's say. Now they're really burning through their savings. So their account has gone from $2,000 down to $750. Their income is still at $1,250, but now inflation is even higher. Prices have gone up more than they were in 2021 to a point where their monthly expenses are now $2,000, a delta of $750. So they start spending a lot less. And this is exactly what Michael Burry's talking about with this bullwhip effect. The retailers, the restaurants, the businesses.
Or they start swiping the credit cards up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down. Okay, if you got that, you know.
And the real economy are starting to see this.
Not everybody will get that.
So they're
it's okay.
getting rid of all this excess inventory, and they're going to start laying off a lot of workers. So we fast forward to what it might look like in 2023. Now the unemployment rate goes right back up to where it was in 2020, represented by the two red average Joes with frowns on their face because they've been laid off by Amazon, let's say. But unfortunately, for the average Joes in aggregate total, their checking account or their bank balance is now at zero. Because remember, they got a raise increase, but it was nowhere near the increase of the prices of the stuff that they buy daily, i.e. inflation. So they're still making $12.50, but now their expenses have gone up even more.
Their expenses won't be like that because based upon mathematics, they wouldn't literally have enough money to do that, even if you had a bunch of credit cards and things like that. At the end of the day, what people start doing is they start moving in with other folks. If times are really that hard, that's just what happens. Like, people move in with their uncles and their parents and, family members and get roommates and stuff like that and just cut down expenses in a massive, massive way. Living in a car or like whatever, right?
The 2100. So they're having to put all of their expenses on their credit card, or literally go into Target and steal what they need to get by. And here's a little chart that I drew up just so you could get your head around it. We go back to 2019 to today's date, and this is just to give you the concept. This is not an actual chart. It's just one that I drew up. So wages, represented by this green line, went up to a significant degree, but nowhere close to as much as inflation went up. So the delta here is a loss of purchasing power for the average Joes in aggregate total. In other words, Americans. So let's think this through.
Here's something very important. Did you hear what he just said? Americans. The thing that's interesting is it's not just America. Actually, we have it better than folks in Europe. And shout out to everybody watching this video in Europe. Europe has it even worse. And so this is a worldwide phenomenon that is causing obviously massive damage. And also a lot of countries are pegged to the dollar. And those ones have gotten hit extra hard with dealing with inflation rates that are actually much above the United States. I mean, I've had some folks even tell me about, inflation rates in some countries, 30, 40, 50 plus percent is just absolutely like insane numbers to think about. And obviously in Europe, many parts, double digit inflation and create, just epic numbers.
And at Amazon goes right back to where it was in 2019. What are they going to have to do with their workforce? Well, most likely they'll have to shrink it down to where it was in 2019. That means they're not going to just lay off 10 or 11,000 people, but eventually, moving into 2023, they're going to have to lay off 800,000 employees that they mistakenly hired in 2020 and 2021 as a result of the bullwhip effect.
So that is a massive prediction. And I want to address that in just a moment. I want to show you something very important in regards to that. If you're thinking, like, is that a realistic possibility? Like, that's just an insane number, right? But one thing I definitely agree with, without question, is companies overhired. No question about it, right? You saw this massive tick up in demand. And so I would say almost, I don't want to say every single business in the United States of America is overstaffed right now, but I think there's a massive amount of them. I mean, a massive amount of them that are overstaffed and don't really need as many employees as they need. Or as they thought they needed, okay? Or as they needed even 12 months ago. Because the thing is, when demand changes for your business, you don't need as many workers, right? Let's say you run a restaurant and you need, you're doing big business, so you need, 7 cooks in the back doing different work, right? And if your restaurant's suddenly much slower, now you might only need 4 cooks. That's just the way it is, right? If you're Amazon and you needed, 600 people working a shift at a massive warehouse, and that might be an extreme amount, 600 people, let's say, for instance, if you ever worked at an Amazon warehouse, let me know how many people usually work a shift at a time. I'd love to hear from you guys. But let's say you had 600 people working a shift, and there's way less volume, well, maybe now you only need 400 people working that shift or 300 people, right? So it's just kind of something to keep in mind if you're going to talk about, weakness in spending and how that affects employment out there in the market.
So if Amazon has to fire half their workforce, assuming this plays out, what does that mean for Home Depot? What does that mean for Target? Or maybe more importantly, what does that mean for the local small business on the corner, the cafe or restaurant that you like to go to every Saturday morning? They have to do the exact same thing. So that's how our unemployment rate in 2023 could go right back to the same levels that we saw during the cerveza sickness in 2020.
That would be insane, because now we're talking about double-digit unemployment, which is worse than the great financial crisis. In the great financial crisis, we got up to 9-ish%, something like that. If we're talking about double-digit unemployment, you're worse than the great financial crisis at that point in time. So that's another massive prediction George makes here.
Only this time, it's an even bigger problem because we've got significant degrees of consumer price inflation that have taken the prices of what people buy daily up way higher than their current levels of income. So I think there's a very strong argument that aggregate demand could not only go back down to where it was in 2019, but could go down a lot further, especially when you consider the fact that people's bank account balance will most likely be far lower in 2023 than it was in 2019.
So demand lower than 2019 he's talking about there. Okay, first off, I appreciate his thoughts there and kind of sharing that. That was pretty much wrapped up his thoughts there, okay? Now, let's talk about Amazon. Let's talk about the economy a little bit and those sorts of things, right? So Amazon in 2019 did $280 billion of revenue. In 2022, they should do over $500 billion of revenue, somewhere around $510 billion, right? So in order for Amazon to want to cut 800,000 employees, they would need to lose several $100 billion of revenue, okay? Now, I don't see that happening. Is it possible that Amazon's revenue could flatline? Is it possible that Amazon's revenue could even go down? Sure, that's always a possibility, right? If the economy got really, really bad. But you got to understand, like, Amazon Web Services is, I don't want to say going to grow in any environment, but it's basically the backbone of almost all companies. So Amazon Web Services is almost always going to grow. At the end of the day, the e-commerce business for Amazon just gets bigger and bigger and bigger over time, with more customers buying more things more often. And so, I think it's a big statement just to think Amazon's revenue would shrink at all. But to say Amazon's revenues are going to go down by hundreds of billions of dollars would mean literally depression in the economy, like that sort of level. And so that's a huge prediction. And, I think, do I think Amazon's workforce is going to be a smaller number by the end of 2023 than it is now? Sure. I think that's definitely a possibility. But do I think they're going to cut half their workforce? No. But you never know. Let's hope for the best in that situation, because, oh gosh, man, you don't want to see that situation. Otherwise, we could be looking. I mean, if Amazon had to cut half their workforce, you know how bad the economy would have to be for that? We'd have to be looking at like 20% unemployment. And here's the thing, the government would never allow that. At the end of the day, what the government would do is they'd go back to stimmies. What they would do at that point in time, if we really started going down a massive rabbit hole there, all they would do is they would start up basically like recurring payments to folks of, whatever they wanted, like $400, $500, $600, $800, $1,000 a month, whatever they wanted to do. And they would just say, it's some sort of program to help out in the massive recession, right? So they would do whatever it took. At the end of the day, when the government's put in these bad situations, whether they put themselves in it, which is usually what happens, or whether they're putting it, what's always a solution? Print, right? In terms of inflation, they have to bring that number down. But I can tell you, if we're talking about Amazon cutting 800,000 employees, you don't have inflation. You would have deflation of proportions we've never seen in the United States. Like, you can't even imagine the numbers. Like oil trading at like $20 a barrel, like that type of deflation at that point in time. It's hard to even fathom. In the great financial crisis, oil fell to like 33 at the lows, something in there, 35, 37. But that was, the economic scenario he just laid out there, far more dire, far worse. And then you're just talking about prices that you can't even imagine. You'd be talking about rents falling 30, 40, 50, 60, 70%, because, apartment buildings and whatnot, they just wouldn't be able to, like, even finance debt, which means the government would have to take it over. That's a whole, I mean, the ramifications for a situation like that, when you start really running through it, it's so mind-boggling that, it's almost like crazy to even think about. So anyways, guys, I hope you enjoyed today's video. A little different thoughts out there. I appreciate everybody for joining me as always. And thank you, everybody subscribed. 19,400 plus subscribers at this point in time. Growing. Reactions all the time. Much love and have a great day.